Hello, and welcome to the Parish Catalyst Thriving Small Groups webinar. Thank you for joining us from all around the country. And I'm just excited for today because small groups are something that's been a vital part of my faith journey. I've been in a small group for over 25 years, and it's not just a new thing, it's not just a Protestant thing, it's an ancient thing that has always been a part of the church from the very beginning. But before we head into that, I want to take a minute to introduce you to our Executive Director, Flip Sanchez, and let him tell you a little bit more about today.
Thanks, John. And thank you to all of you for participating with us. We have a big following today, people all over the country and even as far away as Australia and South Africa. So welcome. And this video recording will be along with all our other webinars, will be featured on our website where you can view them on demand. So we'll post a link to that a little bit later. So also to the people in the future who are watching on demand, hello, and thank you for taking time to be with us today. John mentioned small groups and his faith journey, and me too. It's been such a big part of my faith journey. My small group meets every Wednesday morning at 6:30. We call ourselves the Fishers of Men, and it's just been a huge part of my faith. And Parish Catalyst is an organization that exists to encourage Catholic leaders to think creatively, to act courageously, and to renew the church. And I believe that small groups are a huge part of that church renewal. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we want to give a special thank you to Sister Terry and Renew International, who are going to be joining us today. And they've been a big help in our small group process and helping recruit people to this webinar. So thank you to them. I want to mention a couple things before we get started for people who may have not participated with us before. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a few buttons. There's a chat button, and that's for us to chat with you. That's where we'll post links and different information. I'll post a link to our webinar library on there. And then you'll see a Q&A, and that's, if you have any questions for us, feel free to type it in there and we'll answer them at the end of our webinar. We'll also have a poll during this webinar, and there'll be a pop-up that you could respond to the poll on there. So I'm going to let John get started with the webinar, and I hope you all enjoy today.
Great, thank you, Flip. And as he said, Sister Terry will be joining us later. And let me tell you a little bit more about Sister Terry and her ministry. Let me get into this here. All right. So as you mentioned, Sister Terry Ricard from Renew International, she's the president and executive director. She has also created a lot of their resources, and we're going to be in a conversation with her later on in the webinar. They've also provided a free ebook called Evangelization Matters. And within the next couple of days, every one of you who registered for this webinar will receive an email from us with a list of resources, links, including this ebook, where you can get those. So be on the lookout for that as well. As Flip mentioned, if you want to ask any questions about small groups, resources, any of that, you'll click the Q&A button at the bottom and post those there. And then if you will click the button that says chat, it'll open up a window on the right side of your screen where you can see links and information that we're going to post during the webinar for you to use. So we're going to talk today about the what, the how, and the why of small groups. And I want to start just with what is a small group. I know there are people tuning in that have never been a part of small group ministry before, and you're curious, you want to know more. And there's some of you that have been in small groups for years. So if that's you, just be patient with us for the first little part here as we kind of describe and explain the basics of what a small group is. We'll get into later about the dynamics of how they work and how to best sustain them and grow them in your parish. So I want to first look at what is a small group. And essentially, it is a small group, just like the name suggests, of people. And 5 to 15, that number is not in any way an official number. That's a number that I feel like works well for small groups. You get more than 15, and it's not really a small group anymore. It's more of a social space, which we'll talk about later. But the main important thing is that they're committed to each other, and they're people that are committed to growing as disciples together. And I want you to remember that last part. This is not just a social group. This is a group of people, whatever it looks like, whatever brings them together, their overarching goal is to grow as disciples together. So what can they look like? Small groups are as diverse as humanity itself. And I'll just give you some ideas of what they can look like, how they can be divided up or put together. Life stages is one. Could be young families. It could be singles. It could be college students. It could be empty nesters. What's a predominant life stage at your parish? Or what's a life stage that people need to get connected more because they need that community? Think about those. So you can base them around life stages. You can also base them around gender. It could be a young moms group. It could be a men's group. I love gender-based groups because, one, they're cross-generational and we get to learn from each other. But they also provide some opportunities to have some more candid conversations and a little more vulnerability within this type of group. They can be based around an interest. It could be a running group. It could be a knitting group. It could be a group that wants to study a certain book or a certain book of the Bible. Or it could be people that care about the environment. A friend of mine started a small group in Florida where she gathered people on a beach on Saturday morning, and they spent about an hour picking up waste on the beach. And then they gathered together there on the beach for a Bible study. They got to engage in community together in something that is of importance to them and also to grow as disciples together. So just remember this, the types of groups are diverse, but the purpose is the same, growing as disciples of Jesus Christ. So I guess the next question is, why are small groups important on this discipleship journey? And I want you to remember that the first small group ever was led by Jesus. That the church itself began out of a small group. A group of 12 gathered around together to walk together, to journey in faith together, to learn together, and to be transformed together. This passage out of Acts is pretty familiar to many of us. It describes the early church. It says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. This sounds like a small group, and this was the early church, gathering in homes, growing together, learning together, sharing meals together. And that's the first model we have of a faith community. So I also want to remember that this is something that's vitally important to the Pope. If you're not familiar with this, anybody know what it is? Raise a hand out there in the world. This is the Pope's home. And it's called Casa Santa Marta. And it is a building, a dormitory for traveling religious. The Pope, for the first time since around 1900, gave up the papal apartments. And a friend of mine got to go be in a group of pastors that met with him for a couple of hours. And they opened it up to questions. And one of them asked, why did you choose to live in this building, in this dormitory, rather than in the papal apartments? And this is essentially what he said. He said, I was always looking for community. I did not see myself as a priest on my own. I cannot live alone. I must live my life with others. And he went on to say that without the consistent community of others in faith, I would become spiritually unhealthy. And so I wanted to position myself in a place where that was a necessary part of my life. And so I guess we could say that if it's important to the Pope, it should be important to us also. I think he has a lot of wisdom there to share with us about why small group community is important for our faith journey. So one of our 5 characteristics of a disciple that a dynamic disciple that we talk about at Parish Catalyst is that disciples gather in faith community. And again, I said, this is not just for social activity. This is for spiritual growth. So let's talk about how do small groups help people grow as disciples. And the first one is in wisdom. When we are involved in life in a smaller group of people, weekly, hopefully, gathering together, sharing what's going on in our lives, we gain a lot of wisdom from the counsel of others. Proverbs tells us this many times. And in small groups, we grow in wisdom as we learn and process our life experiences, our changes and challenges that we're going through together with others. Second thing is in learning. In small groups, there's usually some type of learning in environment or opportunity. And this is important, but it can't just be learning. For instance, a small group could easily come together, go through a curriculum for an hour, have some snacks, and say goodbye. And there would be no true community interaction. So while learning and study is important, I don't believe it's the most important part. I believe it's just a part of small group life. Because that vulnerability and interaction is what is the most vital part of a small group. We grow in serving in a small group as we help each other with the things that we're going through. People have needs. They may have car problems. They may need help moving. They may need a ride to the airport. You know, in my small group, we say that the 2 things that people hate to ask for help with the most are moving and a ride to the airport. Can you guys agree with that? And so we've tried to say in our group, if anyone has those needs, that our first answer is going to be yes, unless there is some drastic reason that we can't say yes. Because it's a family, our small group's a family. And families help each other move, and families help each other get to the airport. And in a small group, we grow in this area of discipleship, of serving each other. We grow in helping each other in support and comfort. As people go through health problems and family issues and job issues and all the struggles and challenges we go through in life, in a small group, you are not going through them alone. We are sharing our struggles and our needs with each other, and we're gaining comfort from each other. And as scripture says, we comfort each other with the comfort that we receive from the Lord. And the last area I want to highlight is this area of loving each other. As you can see in this picture, sometimes that's a big challenge, right? But a small group really is a spiritual family. And a family is a group of people we didn't choose to be with, but we are called to love. And if we only surround ourselves with people that are just like us, that are easy to get along with, that we don't have any challenges with, we're not really growing a lot in this area of loving others. And, you know, if sanctification is the goal, and a big part of sanctification is dying to our flesh, I can't think of anywhere better to do that than in a small group. It is a place that we truly learn how to love each other in our differences, in our challenges, in our personal quirks and problems. We really grow in that in a small group. The main concept I want you to remember from small groups and how to identify them is they move people from rows to circles. And I hope this image and this idea sticks with you, because it helps us identify where in our parish are we meeting in rows and where are we meeting in circles. If all of our religious education and sacramental prep and all of these gatherings are in rows, people are not connecting with each other. So what this shows us is that we can take things that are programs or classes that are in rows and create small group connection opportunities within them where people can get used to that small group experience of faith sharing. So we'll be in a class maybe with a curriculum and say, hey, here's us sharing questions. Let's just circle up in groups of 3 or 4 for a few minutes. And let's just share your thoughts about this aspect of the faith journey. Now, I wouldn't call that a small group in and of itself, but it's a chance for people to experience the small group experience and to get more familiar with it. But then what's great is at the end of a class like that, whether it be RCIA or Alpha or Sacramento Prep or any other form of education, at the end of that journey, which was for several weeks, it's great to start small groups out of that class or out of that program and just say, hey, you guys have been growing in your faith together for the last few weeks. We want to provide an opportunity for you to continue to grow in a small group of people that you've already been walking with. It's a great way to transition people into small groups. It's an easy opportunity step for you. So in wrapping up my time here at this beginning part of the webinar, I want to look at an idea called 4 spaces of discipleship. And this is answering kind of the question, where do small groups fit within the parish? And this is from a book that a friend of mine, J.R. Woodward, co-wrote called The Church as Movement. I highly recommend it if you want to better understand small groups and missional communities. But he highlights these 4 spaces that people live in that are spaces that we also experience discipleship in. There's the public space, the social space, the personal space, and the intimate space. And I want to break those down a little bit in more detail for you. The public space, we would say 100 or more people. This is Mass on a Sunday. This is a large group gathering at a parish. And this is where we best gain vision and learning. We're shoulder to shoulder with other people in rows. We're listening to information. There's not any interactivity involved, but it is a great place for casting vision and teaching people. The second is the social space. And we'll just say this is 20 to 70. Again, these numbers are not hard boundaries, but they're just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. This is where we best gain belonging and identity. It's a bit more of a community feel. And we can begin to identify ourselves in these groups as I'm a part of this type of gathering. But still, there's not much opportunity for vulnerability or for connection. And that's where the small group comes in, the personal space of 5 to 15. This is where we have gained personal development. There's accountability. People notice when you don't show up for a small group. And if you don't show up for a group of 40 to 50 people, somebody might notice, but you may not even get followed up with. If you don't show up for a group of 8 people, you're probably going to hear back from somebody, hey, how are you? Are you doing okay? So there's a deeper level of connection and commitment there. And then lastly is this intimate space. And that's a space that we really grow in vulnerability and processing. That's a space where you're more likely to pray together, to share your personal needs with others, and to journey closely together and process what God is doing in your life and your spiritual journey. So I think what's pretty interesting is that we see that Jesus operated in these same 4 spaces in discipleship. We see that in the public space, he preached to the crowds, right? We have the Sermon on the Mount. We hear many stories of Jesus preaching to the crowds in the public space. In the social space, he had this larger group of disciples that he equipped and trained, and he sent out, the 72, right? Then in the personal space, we have his small group where he mentored the 12. And then we see in the intimate space that Jesus was closest with Peter, James, and John. He would often take them alone to go do something. We think about the Transfiguration, which we just read about, right? We see that Jesus operated in all of these different spaces. So where does this fall into the parish life? Let me give you some examples. So the Mass would be the public space, as I mentioned earlier. Ministries would be this social space. Again, this is a place where there's larger groups than a small group often. And you find community and identity there. Great things happen there, but there's not as much vulnerability and intentional spiritual development that happens often in ministries. And then small groups would be that personal space where we are specifically there intentionally to grow as disciples together, to be a spiritual family together. And then what I call triads, hopefully these evolve out of small groups. And that would be smaller groups of 2 or 3 people that are prayer partners, that are really sharing their journey together, where they can really be close and grow as friends and disciples together. And then lastly, we want to direct everyone, and we hope that everyone has a personal relationship with Jesus. What I've found is that my personal relationship with Jesus and my faith has grown the most in small groups and triads. And so as people come to Mass, as they're involved in ministries, we want to continually create opportunities for them to be in a faith journey with smaller and smaller groups of people so that they can really process and be vulnerable and really grow in their faith. I want to close my first part here with this quote from Larry Crabb. And if you haven't read any of Larry's books, I highly recommend them. A great one of his is called The Safest Place on Earth. It is about what the church is meant to be. But he says, the future of the church depends on whether it develops true community. We can get by for a while on size, skilled communications, and programs to meet every need. But unless we sense that we belong to each other, with masks off, the vibrant church of today will become the powerless church of tomorrow. Stale, irrelevant, a place of pretense, where sufferers suffer alone, where pressure generates conformity rather than the Spirit creating life. That's where the church is headed unless it focuses on community. That is a strong word, but I think if we look at the research with millennials and the next gen, especially those who would say that they are non-affiliated any longer with any form of faith community, I think many of them would say, and we see this in the research, they say that it's because it was stale, irrelevant, a place of pretense where people were not real and vulnerable, a place where people felt pressure for conformity rather than being accompanied and guided in transformation. And we see that those shifts from pressure and conformity to transformation and spiritual growth, those shifts from suffering alone or a place of pretense into a place of vulnerability and a place of authenticity often happen in small groups. So I want to, before we go to the second half here with Sister Terry, I want to ask for your feedback on what you'd like to see for our next webinar. Now, I got to say, we've never done this before. We've never done a poll live like this, so there's a good chance this could completely crash and burn, or it may work wonderfully. So let's just give this a try. I'm going to launch this poll now. And I believe you can just respond to it right there on your screen. If you can, hopefully we'll see some responses coming in. There they come, fantastic. And we're getting live feedback from your responses. I did just put on there for just one answer because I know a lot of you are gonna click all of them, but we really wanna know what is the highest desire, highest need out there among parish leaders. Our goal is to support you as parish leaders, to help give you courage and equip you with tools and help you think creatively. So we're going to do that the best ways that we can. And it looks like leadership development is a strong response there. I'll give just a couple more minutes for anybody that wants to respond. And we will close that poll now. Going. All right, thank you so much for that. What's interesting is leadership development was not even on our list of upcoming webinar topics. So this is why polling is very important. And we highly recommend parishes to poll your parish often, even in Pew surveys, to help identify the needs of the parish. So let me see, I will share the results now. I don't know that you had those. So in a close second was dynamic discipleship and growing volunteers. And I know that we're gonna do growing volunteers in the near future as well. So before we get to Sister Terry, I want to take a minute to tell you about something we offer called Parish Catalyst On-Site Workshops. You may be getting an email about that soon. This is where we come to your parish to do a workshop, much like this webinar, but it's interactive, it's on location at your parish, and it engages your people creatively. It helps them have a voice in the parish and to share their ideas, but it also equips them better in different areas. So we offer them in growing volunteers, which you would bring all of your volunteer leaders and your staff to that one. And we would help teach them how to multiply the volunteers in your parish and how to make volunteering more fun and engaging and life-giving for your volunteers, make them more sustainable. Thriving Small Groups, which is today, some of the content you're seeing is from that Thriving Small Groups workshop, but this is about a 6-hour workshop that helps give vision to your parish about small groups. It would equip your leaders. Leading up to the workshop, we even help you identify and invite future leaders of small groups at your parish. So if you're looking to launch small groups, I'd really encourage you to consider the Thriving Small Groups on-site workshop. And then hospitality has been a big one that we've done many hospitality workshops where we train and equip the greeters and the ushers and the leaders of ministries so that every place in your parish is a place that feels welcoming and loving. And then lastly, community impact, which is where we help look at the needs of the community around your parish and find out how your parish can best connect with the needs of your community to create goodwill by doing good works, and that opens the door for the good news of the gospel. And lastly, I want to invite Flip to share with you about learning. We have one in just a few weeks.
Yes, John. Well, John has talked a lot today about discipleship. And we know that in order to renew the church, we need courage, we need creativity, but we need disciples. And when we look at the parishes that are doing a great job in the area of discipleship, the common thread that they all have is they have a plan. They have a plan for welcoming people into their parishes, for inviting them into ministry, for helping them grow in their relationship with Christ, and sending them out. And so really our learning communities are all about planning. And what we do is we invite 12 parishes to come together, pastor and some of the key staff, and they plan together. And they're able to share their gifts, share their challenges and their opportunities, and create a plan specific for the needs of their parish. And so we've had some great success with the over 70 parishes that we've worked with, and we hope to keep it going, but we need great parishes. So if you're part of a parish that would like to participate, or if you know of a parish, nominate them, and we'd be happy to talk to you more about that opportunity. John?
Thanks, Flip. Our next community starts April 29th. There's 2 spots left. If you are a parish that's interested in that, please reach out to us right away. We would be interested in being a part of that. All right, I'm going to no further ado, I'm going to go to Sister Terry, and she's going to share with us 6 key principles for growing small groups ministry. I hope you'll get your pen and paper out, and also you can stream this later if you'd like to share it with your staff. So let's go to that now. All right, so this is Terry, and look forward to hearing what you have to share regarding building small group faith communities at our parishes.
Thanks, John. It's great to be able to share some of my experience, some of my own findings on how to grow small group ministry in your parish. So the title of my presentation is 6 Key Principles for Growing Small Group Ministry. I'll talk about the why and the purpose of small faith sharing groups, and then I'll review each of the principles that will help you both launch them and grow small groups for the purpose of making missionary disciples. So again, why even take the time, the resources to grow small communities? Parish Catalyst study report in the book Great Catholic Parishes that 61.5% of parishes interviewed have an active small group ministry for, again, the purpose of awakening and deepening people's faith, and as a key strategy of making disciples. According to Gallup research on congregational engagement, 43% of the people who belong to a parish small group are highly engaged in the life of the parish and beyond. What's more, those who belong to small communities score significantly higher on every item of Gallup's engagement scale. Gallup Parish Engagement Study reveals that small group enables members to form strong personal bonds, address their spiritual needs. They learn and grow more fully in their faith. They feel others care about them. And most importantly, have a greater sense of mission. Kara did a study for us at Renew that had very similar results. Participants said the following increased very much as a result of being part of a small community: awareness of God's presence in their life, their commitment to the Catholic Church. They talked about participating in Mass more attentively and frequently, integration of faith into their daily life, personal spiritual growth, greater knowledge of the faith, and feeling more deeply part of their parish community. So small groups have the potential to be engines of missionary discipleship emanating from your parish. So here are the 6 key principles for developing and growing a successful small group ministry. First, write down the vision. Define the purpose. Choose, empower, and form leaders. 4, develop a strategy. 5, offer options and provide solid content. And 6, continue to grow your small group ministry. Write down the vision. In the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 2, the Lord tells the prophet, write down the vision and make it plain upon the tablets. It is simple. No leadership, no vision equals a parish at best in maintenance mode. And I would say in our time, in the mode of diminishment. A vision sets a pastoral direction. So when thinking about small communities and how they fit into the life of your parish, a proposed vision may be the parish as a dynamic community of communities. In such a vision and structure, parishioners gather in small groups determined by neighborhood, language, family, affinity, availability, interest, or a common ministry. And they gather in these small groups in order to pray, to read the Word of God in light of what's going on in their life and in the world, to learn, to share, and to work, to support one another. And all of that leads to gospel action. So the 5th and most important purpose is mission, and that permeates all the other dynamics of the small community. So this vision is not a parish with small groups, but as a parish as a community of small communities. Second principle, define the purpose. And I would say this, to define the purpose for those key leaders, your parish council, your parish staff, as well as parishioners. Be clear on the why of small groups. The heart and purpose of what small groups are about. They are about making disciples. So Jesus didn't say, go and offer small groups. But what Jesus did say was go and make disciples. So it's the vehicle, the environment that these small communities create that becomes schools of discipleship. Vibrant and fruitful small communities are both gathered and sent. So gathered to deepen faith knowledge of the faith, and then sent out to be disciples of Jesus Christ in the family, in the workplace, and in the world. In Pope Francis' recent exhortation on holiness, rejoice and be glad, he refers to the need for both contemplation and action. So for small communities to be schools of holiness, they need not only to have a mission, but more importantly, they need to understand themselves as on a mission, or they simply can become support groups. The third principle, choose, empower, and form leaders. And you know, in any vibrant parish, it's all about leadership and all levels of leadership. The most effective small group ministry is supported by the pastor and staff. It's integrated into the mission and vision of the parish. It has a person that's appointed. It's clear that this person is the leader of small group ministry, but they're part of a team dedicated to nurturing, supporting, and growing these small groups in the parish, with a particular focus on choosing leaders, supporting them, helping them to grow, and always calling forth new leaders. The point person or the small community coordinator, this person is not just about administering them or choosing the resource, but really a person who has the ministry traits, you know, a servant leader that empowers others, calls people together, a person who embraces the vision and understands it, so that these many small groups are part of creating a deeper sense of community and mission in the whole parish. Some of the tasks of this coordinator is to meet with the small group leaders, either both before the season, make sure they have proper training and support, and then in between seasons, so that there's feedback, so that the pastor and the staff can hear, you know, what's on the hearts and minds of these folks who are meeting in these small groups. Always saying, you know, what are the needs out there, and bringing them back to the planning and all the different activities in the parish. Small group ministry that's effective, that really increases engagement in the mission of the parish, flows from, again, the mission and the vision of the parish on the whole. So it's important that these small groups aren't kind of on their own, but they're integrated in the full ministerial life of the parish. The fourth principle is develop a strategy. Now, the first strategy is, how do you launch these small groups? And then how do you nourish them? And then how do you keep growing them? Oftentimes, you know, with Renew, we're the people that help you launch those small groups. But people kind of get stuck and they want to just stay in their small group. But how do you keep challenging people to invite others, to grow the small groups? It's never enough. I remember we were in one parish and the pastor said, you know, there are too many small groups. You can never have too many. We want to keep inviting people into these small groups and seeing themselves as part of the biggest parish community. So moving from the small groups into the ministry in their homes, in the world, and then always back to the Eucharist, to the Sunday celebration, empowered by the Eucharist to go forth and share the word of God, again, nurtured in these small groups, and then back again to the Sunday worship. I would say, too, that strategies, first, the initial launch, and I will always say, start with the people in the pews, get them engaged. And as you know, the people in the pews have variety of engagement in the parish. So 5-6% might be very engaged, and then you have these kind of outer circles. So you start with those most engaged and kind of get to that next level and the next level. Most of those are people who are in the pews at least once a month. So we have all sorts of strategies that Renew. A big one is what we call Sign Up Sunday, an opportunity to talk about the small groups, the purpose, lay that out, have somebody give a testimony, and then start signing people up. Once you get a core group of people that are involved in the small groups, then you want to keep expanding. You say, okay, so how do we get people that are not in the pews? Well, most of that is one-on-one invitation. So it's encouraging those who are in small groups to invite somebody to be part of a small group. In my experience, the best people who rarely go to church or maybe go to church at Christmas or some of those religious ed parents is to have people in the group invite them. And it's always easier to invite somebody who's in a home small group. It's easier to pass the threshold of somebody's door of someone's house than to actually cross the, enter the doors of the church. So it's a good first step to get people engaged and then say, hey, come with me to church. Also, what we try to encourage people to do when we're helping them to launch and to grow their small groups is say, okay, maybe this season we want to focus on young people or seekers and what religious ed parents. So what are the different strategies we can do of invitation that we can reach out to those people? What are the kind of resources that would really engage them? And then I would say also part of that strategy is to see if it works. I think we're great sometime in the church we have great ideas, we roll them out, but then we don't measure the impact. So how many people came? Talk to them. What drew them there? Maybe some people didn't continue. Call them up. How come? Now, sometimes it's not about the people in the group. It's just they changed jobs or the time wasn't good, whatever it may be. So again, measure the impact, find out, and then make adjustments as you continue to develop strategies of invitation. The fifth principle, offer options and provide solid content. For me, the reason why that at Renew we get such large groups of people in these small groups, if it's a good sized parish, 100, 150, we've had people as much as 900 people is the highest amount in a parish involved in small groups. And for me, it's about the variety of times. So when I worked in a parish, we would say, okay, let's have a Bible study, 7:30 on a Wednesday night. Or let's have even the RCIA, there'd be one night that we haven't been. Now, so what we've discovered is everybody's not free at 7:30, 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night. People work different kind of hours. Sometimes they have shift work. It's hard. They're doing children's homework or whatever it might be. So for me, what's the beauty of these small groups is that you can have 10 different locations, 10 different times. And that's what it really attracts people. So it could be a Friday night. For some people don't like to drive at night. So after the 9 o'clock mass, it's a great time for a small group. For young families, sometimes a Sunday afternoon is better. So again, to offer a variety of times, that's why you need and to entrust these small groups to trained facilitators, leaders. Also, different types of groups. So you have some in the neighborhood, you have some that are in the church itself. You can have affinity groups. We've had men's groups or women's groups, young moms groups. So depending on the parish and people's interests, they can group themselves in that way. But in my experience, most people choose because of the time. So that's a really important thing in our time and culture. The second thing is to have a variety of small groups. So at Renew, we really launch seasonal small groups. And we usually say to people, meet 6 weeks in the fall and 6 weeks in Lent. Now, some of our groups, when we finish a process, they continue in that mode. Others say, I'd like to meet once a month. What studies show us, if you want to keep a group together, it's probably better to meet every 3 weeks or so. Once you get past that month, people start losing that sense of cohesiveness. Some people like to meet in Advent and Lent, take the summer off, whatever it might be, so that people have according to their time. Again, in my experience, people who are working and have multiple family obligations, they really like that 6 weeks, take a break, come back for 6 weeks. Other folks, if they have more time, maybe they're retired, they like to do every week. So again, let people have options. Another group is ministerial small groups. So for instance, you might meet as liturgical ministers and pray together, share faith together. A friend of mine, I actually play golf with her, and she was telling me that in her parish, she's in the choir. And she said, we have a small group in the sense that we practice every week and we take 30 minutes to share on that upcoming gospel. And the choir director facilitates that. They all prepare ahead of time. They share how that gospel touches their life. And from that, they sing the music for that coming Sunday. Other times people, also when I was in the parish, our staff, we met together every Monday and we shared on that Sunday gospel. And we helped to bring in our ministerial experiences, and it helped shape the preaching for that Sunday. Other people want to meet every week, and we call those ongoing small Christian communities. They have a deeper commitment, and they meet more regularly and ongoing. So again, I think you have to, especially in our society, people want options, they want flexibility, and they want things according to their schedules. The other thing about, besides having this variety of options, I think another really important principle is that you provide mission-directed faith-sharing resources. So what happens sometimes, the groups start out that way, and then they start saying, well, maybe we're just going to share on what happened this week, or they begin to maybe a book club, where the focus of mission has to be primary here. So I would really strongly urge whatever small group resources you use that See, Judge, Act methodology. And that's all our resources at Renew. We might call them different things. They might be lectionary or about spirituality, but somewhere in there we use that See, Judge, Act to be able to people to speak from their experience, connect that to God's word, to judge that by scripture and the teachings of the church, and then always be moved to action, to gospel action, again, in their family, in their workplace, and in the community. And the sixth principle, continue to grow your small group ministry. So, in the Acts of the Apostles, that's that great reading that talks about that the apostles and disciples met together in homes, they broke bread and the word of God, and they continued to add people to their numbers. So these groups are evangelical. I mean, we want to keep growing them and sharing our faith and moving people to a deeper commitment to Jesus Christ and to bring the gospel to the world, to be about charitable works and just acts. So you constantly want to be pushing people outward. I love that saying from Pope Francis. We have to move people from the sacristy into the street. So this is not hard. This is hard because I've talked to a lot of people in small groups, and once they get comfortable and the group becomes vibrant, they want to just stay the way they are. It's like the transfiguration, stay on the mountain. But we have to keep pushing people. Yes, it's important to feel the power of God in your group, but you got to keep that sense of moving out, inviting others. So that sense of, yes, you want to nurture those groups, but think from the inside out, not from the outside in. So what can we do to include more people, to move people to a deeper place? one of the pictures I have here is we had a great process there, Arise Together Christ, in the Archdiocese of Boston. And the woman in that picture, the first center there, she came to the training for the small groups, and she brought Arise 2 to the Boston home, and they gathered each week. So a lot of those folks can't come to the church. So she brought the church to them. Another in that top picture there, two of those women were in a small group, but they wanted to form a small group with people who are homebound. So two of these women lived together there, so they came together and formed a small group with people who can't get out. So this is, again, thinking from the inside out. Keep inviting people, thinking of creative ways to help people to gather, to deepen their faith, and have a greater sense of belonging to the parish. There is no silver bullet to parish renewal, you know that. But developing and growing your small group ministry with this outward, mission-oriented focus is a proven way to increase parish engagement by helping people to awaken their faith, have a greater sense of belonging, deepen their faith, and sharing their faith through their words, and most importantly, through gospel-inspired action. Thank you, and just wish you many blessings as you try to enliven your parish, particularly through growing small groups in your parish. Thank you.
Well, thank you again so much for being with us today.
Very well.
Thank you,
Great.
Sister Terry.
Thank you very much, John.
There. And as she mentioned, there are great resources through Renew International. We're doing a sign-up Sunday, great resources for small group curriculum. And also Evangelical Catholic has, Jason Simon, a friend of ours, has some great small group strategies and programs as well. We're coming to the end of our time, but I wanted to open it up for some Q&A. Flip, do you have some questions there to share?
We do, and the first question is about small groups. If your small group begins to lose members, should you add more, or eventually does it wear itself out?
Well, I would say that a small group goes through seasons often. If it's just a group that's meeting in someone's home on a regular basis, I know my small group at times has had 15 people, and at times there's only been 4 of us. If you're building true relationships, I wouldn't say that it ever wears itself out unless the leaders just need a break. But we take summers off as a break. We'll do social things throughout the summer, but that gives everyone kind of a break and gives them freedom to travel and do what they need to do. But I think what Sister Terry said is important, that a small group grows through people inviting people to come and join, and invites them to come with me and be a part of this and see if it's something that you're interested in. So I hope that helps a little bit with that question.
Sure it does, and it leads well to our next question. And what happens when people invite so many people that a small group is no longer small?
A small group, when it grows so much. That's a great question and a great problem that I've seen. So I recommend a small group actually have multiple hosts, not just one, even 3 or 4 people that are on the leadership team. And for a couple of reasons. One is that it gives the leaders freedom. If they have something come up with a family member, or if they need to travel for work, they don't feel like everything hangs on them every week. You can share the responsibilities. Secondly is you can be mentoring people to start another small group. And we call that multiplication. And so ideally, if you grow like that, over that time, you are mentoring someone to take your place or to start another group. And when that time comes, I would say usually, I've seen that happen most when it gets to be about between 15 and 20 on a regular basis. Those leaders just say, hey, we really want to keep this smaller where people can have closer relationships and more conversation. So in 2 weeks, we're going to be launching a new small group. I'm going to be leading it. Talk to me if you'd like to be a part of that.
Let's see. What are some strategies or resources that a parish might use to work with facilitators? Can they be effective coaches or mentors?
Yeah, as Sister Terry mentioned, she has some great resources for training small group leaders or hosts. There's a lot out there. If you just use the Google, there's a lot out there. But the main thing I would encourage you to do is develop them relationally. I would make a small group of people that you want to lead small groups and spend weeks with them, investing in them, developing them, using these resources, doing for them what you want them to do for the people that come into their group. Something that Sister Terry and I talked about offline was that as leaders in the parish, the number one thing that you need to do to sustain a small groups ministry is invest in the leaders. Make them the people that you focus on shepherding. And as I said before, do for them what you want them to do for the people in their group. So bring them together. Once I would do it very regularly prior to the launch of small groups. And then once the small groups launch, I would recommend doing it probably monthly, a lunch after Mass, once a month, a free lunch. You provide the food and just invite them to come. If they have any questions or if they just want any help with their groups, invite them to come to that.
Next question comes from Claudia Letres. Do the small groups have to meet on the parish or just anywhere?
Good question. Small groups can meet anywhere, literally, that people go. Mine meets in a home. Some can meet in a parish. I've even seen parishes build rooms or set up rooms within the parish that look like a living room. They have a TV and a DVD player, whatever you want to use for curriculum, where people can meet in the parish for a small group where it's a more cozy environment that feels like a small group. Flip's small group meets on the beach, which is a benefit of being in Santa Monica, but they have picnic tables. So they have a group that's grown to like 30 or 40 people, and they'll split up around these tables and actually have small groups within that group to have their faith share discussion. It can meet at a coffee shop, it can meet at a park, it literally can meet anywhere. That's one of the great parts of small groups. One thing I wanted to suggest as we wrap up here, if you're launching small groups for the first time at your parish, you've really got to cast a vision for this, and it needs to come from the pastor. So I would recommend for 4 or 5 weeks that the pastor finds some way to fit into his homily the importance of community and kind of put out there this idea that we're going to be starting some small faith communities within our parish. I would tell stories about it. I would have people get up and share a witness about how small group faith sharing experience impacted their life. I would put stories in the bulletin about small groups. And you want to cast vision, not just give information. I would make it a priority through social media. So give a long runway to take off with on this ministry. Take lots of time to inspire people and encourage them and give them a vision for what you want them to be a part of. And I think if you do that for 4 or 5 weeks, that you will start with a good base of people who already are excited about being a part of small groups. Another great way to launch small groups is through Alpha. If you've heard about Alpha, you can check out the website. Alpha, I believe it's alpha.org. Alpha is a program or course that is small groups based, and it's a great way to start small groups on site at your parish in a way that all the curriculum's provided, very easy, very low barrier to entry, and then out of Alpha, which is 10 weeks, you could launch small groups in people's homes. One more, Flip. I think we're running out of time, but what's one more question you got there?
Sure. Well, I'm actually going to do 2 more because one of them I already kind of answered in the chat line. Somebody was just asking for resources, and you mentioned that Renew has tons of resources. There's resources through Evangelical Catholic, and many other groups. Like John said, I think that's one thing that we're not short of. What we do as a group is we just read the readings from the next Sunday. We kind of dive into those. But I guess our last question would be, do you have any tips for inviting young families?
I just want to just reiterate what you just said. I think we can overcomplicate this whole thing, and we don't know what curriculum to find. We don't know how to start. And the easiest and best curriculum is the readings for the coming Sunday. You just have folks gather together at someone's home. Somebody provides some snacks. We spend about half an hour just connecting with each other, catching up on life. And then different people read the readings. And then we just have a faith sharing time. What God is speaking to us through these readings. And maybe someone has done some study and they know a little bit more. But that's a very easy way to do it. And then your people come to Mass on Sunday, having already reflected on the readings for that week, and Mass even has a deeper experience for them. Getting young families involved in small groups. People with children, this is a complexity issue with small groups. If you really want to accommodate it, you can do them on site at the parish and provide childcare. That's huge. But I would say more likely have them just meet every other week. Have them meet at someone's home. And I've had groups where someone each week volunteers to watch the kids while everyone else participates in a small group. You can do that. That gives the adults a little more time to be really connected and actually engage in spiritual formation. But another one is you just gather and you let the kids run around and you do the best you can to have some conversation together and just recognize that you're a family. However you do it, the most important thing is that you come together and find what works best for your group. So, you want to wrap us up, Flip?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to wrap it up by saying thank you, John. You did a great job. And thank you once again to Sister Terry and Renew International. And of course, thank you to all of our participants today. We wish you a very meaningful rest of your Lent, and may it lead you to a very happy Easter.